Welcome to the Imposter Syndrome Club. My name is Jessamy G. I am joined as always by my beautiful co-host Alice Edie.
Hello.
Hello. And today we are joined by our beautiful guest, Sammy P.
Oh,
Sam
hello.
Petersen.
Thank you for calling me beautiful. That's wonderful.
You are
Yes.
absolutely stunning.
It's the Jessamy G treatment.
Yeah, it's lovely. Oh, wow. I come back all the time. My goodness.
It feels real good.
Yeah. It's so lovely to meet you, Sammy. This is the first time that we're meeting, but I'm a big fan of both of your podcasts.
Oh, thank you.
And so now I have that weird thing where I feel like I know a lot about you and that I know you already.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But you don't know me. But we're already friends.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah. I always find that weird though because I listen to lots of podcasts and I think I'm friends with people that like – I thought I was friends with Will Anderson for so long. I just always thought I just go, oh my goodness. I just start talking to people like I know them and I'm like, I absolutely have no idea who you are. But that's the beauty of it as well, that podcasting, it's really nice because when I do live shows and stuff, people just come up to you and start talking and it's just like there's no small talk.
Yeah.
Just like they start talking to me about something I might have mentioned like 16 episodes ago or something and I have no idea what I said that long ago. But people bring up things. So it's really nice. So thank you for having me.
It is such a pleasure. Yeah, it's a funny thing because I think it's the same with radio, I think. Like friends of mine who've worked in breakfast radio.
Yeah.
Because they're quite these sort of intimate moments, like you're listening in the car or in the shower, like people are in your home.
Yeah.
So, you know.
They didn't even ask to come in. They're broken in.
Yeah.
Just talking at you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then like watching me brush my teeth.
It's lovely.
So thank you, Sammy. And
Thank you.
The way this podcast starts is that we ask our guests to read their own bio.
Oh,
so would you indulge us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I said before that I've never really had a bio. I've never really, because I always find like writing something about yourself is always a bit tiresome.
It's awful.
Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah.
It's kind of like handing out flies. Like I remember doing stand-up and like handing out flies with your face on them to someone. It's just like the worst thing you can do. And they refuse your face. They go, no.
They look from the flyer up to you.
See
down
your
the flyer
sad
and,
face.
oh, no, thank you.
A bit desperate.
Oh, no.
It's going, I've only got 12 people in tonight. Okay, so my biography is this. Sammy Petersen is an ex-comedy person, current producer, podcaster and filmmaker.
Straight to the point.
Straight to the point.
Yeah.
I don't muck about.
No filler.
I couldn't be bothered doing more than that. If people want to know more, they just invite me somewhere and I'll tell them.
Fabulous. Well, first question I'm interested in. So ex-comedian.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and why it's now ex-comedian?
Yeah, because I always kind of felt like I wasn't a comedian. And I'm very uncomfortable with the term comedian. I always have been. And people still sometimes call me it and I get very uncomfortable because I always felt like, and this is with your podcast, I always felt like I was an imposter in the comedy world. I never really felt like I was a comedian. I did it, but I never felt like I was. And there was this thing of like, I grew up watching stand-up. And so I never thought that I would do it. I always thought I'd be a filmmaker. And so when I'm very comfortable calling myself a filmmaker for some reason, real cocky about that. But then I was like, I don't really call myself a stand-up. And I think it was because someone once said, you can't call yourself a stand-up until you've done it for 10 years or something like that. And it was just this thing that I had in my head where I did it for about 7 or 8 years. And I felt like maybe I could have given myself a bit of leniency towards the end and been like, no, you can probably call yourself that, mate. But I never did. And I did it for a long time and I loved doing it. But I started when I was like 18 or 19 around then. And then I was like, oh, well, yeah, I could probably call myself a comedian, but then there's an uncomfortable conversation when someone asks what you do and then you have to kind of tell them that you do stand-up and then people ask for a joke and you're like, I don't have any jokes. And they go, what sort of comedian are you? It was just like, it's always that kind of conversation and I never wanted that. And I also didn't want the pressure to be funny.
Yeah.
I always do things where other people are funny. Like I can make other people funny, but I don't want to be the funny person. I think my motto in life is like, if you're the funniest person in a room, you're in the wrong room. And I've always kind of felt that if you are the funniest person, it's kind of that thing of going, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. It's pretty much ripped off that. TM, that's mine. Yeah. But I always feel like that. So my stand-up career ended very quickly. I mean, it started and being out of that comedy world for so long is that's why I started a podcast, just to kind of stay in touch with comedians. But I was very happy to get out when I got out.
It's so interesting hearing you say that, because isn't that supposedly one of the kind of differences between the mindset of stand-up comedians and improv comedy is the idea of like stand-up being kind of this idea of the spotlight and it's all about you, versus improv, good improvisers make each other look good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're kind of doing both, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a team rather than just going, this is mine, I wrote this. And when it goes really badly, which a lot of the time it does, but especially when you first start out, like my first gig ever was amazing. Like it was so good. I had friends there. And then, you have people there that love you and want to support you. And then the second gig was the two people who just absolutely hated me. Like, and so you go from like that to then go, oh no, this is going to be really hard. And a lot of the time you're going, you don't have an excuse. Like you can't. That's why I started doing shows with other people, because I was like, when I was doing a show with just me and I'd be there at a pub and it would just be me and then people are not liking it, you can't go, someone else wrote this shit.
Yeah.
Like if I was doing Shakespeare and it wasn't going well, I'd go, someone else wrote this shit. Yeah. But you can't do that with stand-up. It's like you have to go, this is on me. And I didn't work hard enough for this. I didn't do this enough, or I didn't practice this enough, or I didn't get up on stage and really hone this. I'm doing this and you guys are suffering because of that.
Like I've heard that like 10-year thing as well. Like that's how long it takes you to find your voice, or that's when you can really call yourself a comedian.
Which is wild, because I would never think that of someone else. I never look at other people who have been doing it for like 2 years and I never would go, you're not a comedian. Like I would never do that.
You've only been a doctor for 4 years.
Yeah. You can't call yourself a doctor. Disgusting behaviour.
It's one of those weird things, and I think so. Alice is starting a new career in tattooing, and so we've been talking about it. It's a similar, obviously quite different, but similar in the sense that there's this culture of having to pay your dues before you can get up and call yourself a tattoo artist, call yourself a comedian. But it's interesting as well. I think probably in both those worlds, you've got that kind of like harsh, you can't call yourself a comedian, pay your dues thing, but they're both also really centered around a sense of community. Like you can say there's a really strong community. So this
you're in or you're out, and who gets to decide and who's policing that kind of feeling of inclusion. And
I think you think people are policing them, especially when you're in your early 20s, and then you realise no one's around. So true. No one cares. No one's thinking about it that much. But you think you are. You're in your head, you're like, oh my God, everyone's thinking about it. And if that person heard me call myself a comedian, they're going to come and tell me I can't be doing that. Take my badge and gun away.
They've added you to the list.
Yeah, that's right. I'm on the blacklist now.
Siren goes off.
Never work again.
So why, when you reach that 8-year threshold, and maybe this is too simplistic a question, but like, why did it change?
The big thing was I found out I had a heart condition, which meant that I physically blacked out on stage. Is the actual reason I stopped doing it, which is a pretty full-on way to go. I stopped doing it because of that. The other reason, and I'll go back to that one, I'll just leave that one, I'll never talk about it again. The big reason was I got to a point where I was making documentaries. I really enjoyed that. I liked that way more, and I was producing people to be funny. And I was producing a lot of other people. I was doing a lot of different things. And I found that if I was out every night doing stand-up, then I wasn't giving as much to these things, these projects. And I like being home at night. Unless I'm going out to meet a friend, I really want to be home at night. Like I remember the first night I wasn't doing stand-up, like after a week when I finished, I was like, I'm just going to be at home tonight. And it was 8 p.m. and I was like, I don't have to go anywhere. This is put your feet up, watch some crappy like Kardashians or, I was just like so excited about that. But I found out I had a heart condition, but I found out on stage. I reckon I was like 25 or 26. And I was on stage and a girl I liked had come and seen me for the first time do stand-up. So I was like really anxious. Like I was kind of like, and I felt weird, but I didn't feel like it was anything other than general anxiety of going on stage. And then it was a really tough gig. It was called Lucky Cock, and it's pardon Vicar. No, I'm just it was called Lucky Cock, and it was basically the whole night. It's like it starts at 9 p.m, but everyone is having $4 pizzas. It's kind of like a uni night. They're having $4 pizzas.
Oh, is this the one off Chapel Street?
I've heard. Awful.
Yeah. Okay.
And people
I've
are
heard the
having,
legends of this.
Oh, and people are having like pizza. They're having a really nice night. They're chatting to their friends, and then there's a tap on the microphone, and someone goes, "Comedy's about to start in 5 minutes." People hate surprise comedy. I hate surprise. Like I never go and watch comedy really unless it's a friend show, because I just go, "Oh, this is." I feel so awful for the people if they're not getting laughs. So I was like, oh, fuck. So that happened. And then I was like, oh, no, this is probably the worst gig I could have brought her to for see me do stand-up for the first time. And then I started, and I just felt like my whole body was kind of like shaking, and I just felt like I started trembling a bit. And then I just physically blacked out, and I grabbed the mic stand and just went down. And then I woke up, like I came to, and everyone was just staring at me, like wondering if it was like still part of the act or like what was going on. Because what I was talking about, like it wasn't, like it wouldn't be wild if that happened then. Like if I made a joke about something and then I went down, like it wasn't like out of the ordinary or anything. Not that I did that all the time, but it was not so.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And then and then someone carried me off stage, a guy called Ryan Coffey, who was on the same bill as me, and he took me off and he sat with me outside and sat with me for a bit. An ambulance was coming, I think, at that point, and then another comedian, Nick Kappa, who he went to one gig, met a girl there, really liked her, wanted to go back and chat to her. So he rushed to come to the other gig, only got there just as the MC introduced him. So he got on after me, but didn't know what had happened to me. So he just acted like everything was completely normal. Oh. And no one talked about it. So the whole time, the people who were sitting there going, is this guy okay? I got rushed to hospital, and they were like, because I've never done a drug in my life, and they were like, it's cocaine, it's whatever. They were thinking if your heart is racing that fast. And then flashing forward like 2 years after this, I got back up on stage just to prove that I could still do it, and it wasn't that wasn't gonna be the reason I don't do it. But I got back up and I started talking, and a woman up the front just went, "Oh my God." And I kept talking. I was like, that's not the reaction that you want. Like, and she goes, "Oh my God." And she goes, "You're alive." And I was like, "What?" And she goes, "Oh, I thought you died." And I was like, "Why?" And she goes, "I was there that night."
What?
And she goes, "I've been worried about you. I've been trying to find you."
I was going full goosebumps.
Yeah. And I chatted to her after it, and she was like, "I was so worried." Like, she was like, "I went home and you didn't do stand-up after that." And I just thought something bad must have happened. And I stopped doing it, but then a few friends of mine were like, "You've got to get back up." So I started getting back up and I started talking about what happened. And that was really good. And then I kind of did like a final last show where I was like, I got booked for like a headline spot where I was like, do an hour and in Adelaide. And so I did an hour and I came off the first night and I was like, I think I'm not going to do this anymore. Like I was just like, I have proved I can do it.
Yeah.
And, I can do it to the point where I thought I had never thought that I could do it like that. And so then I did 4 more nights and then I was of the hour, and then I was like, I think I'm done.
Yeah.
And I've never kind of wanted to get back up after that. That was kind of it.
Full on.
Yeah.
So the coming back to it, was that, I mean, I know you said to sort of prove to yourself that you could,
Yeah.
and then also presumably sort of so you could leave on your own terms.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and not let it defeat me or be the reason that I go, I could get over that. And when I started doing the podcast, then I started doing live podcasts, and then I was terrified because I was like, oh shit, like I'm putting myself back into this position, and I was like, oh, okay, well I won't talk too much before the podcast. So I was like, I'll just get my friends out. And that will be a safety net. But then before that, a few people asked me to go and do like some live debates and some other things. So I started doing a lot of stuff on stage before I did the live podcast, because I was the first one, because I was like, I don't want to get on and that will be, because I was just thinking that would be awful if I got back up and just went straight back down.
Yeah.
And that would be like, but because I swim and I do, so I have like a really low heartbeat anyway. So I have because I used to do competitive swimming. I've got like a resting heartbeat that's really low. And then it would jump from whatever it is. Like if it was like 69 beats per minute, and then it would jump to like 180. So it would be that jump, that leap that would kind of really undo me and be the reason that I was blacking out. So it made a lot of sense once I found out about it. But a few years before that, I was on a plane, not to brag, but I was on a plane doing pretty well. And I was going to do a show in Perth, and I went to the bathroom, that little tiny bathroom on the plane, and I woke up in the bathroom and I was on the floor and I was going, what is going on here? So I'd had moments where I had blacked out before, but I never put them together, and I never thought that I blacked out. I was always kind of like, oh, what happened? Like it was kind of like a weird haze. I'd been really sleepy and I was like, oh, what's happened? Maybe I just tripped or something. Or so I'd had moments like that, but it wasn't until I actually found out what the diagnosis was that I was like, oh, okay. And they're like, you can do whatever you want to do. It's just like monitor it. So I have an Apple Watch and stuff to monitor my heartbeat, and I've got those sorts of things in place. But yeah, they were the two reasons that I stopped doing comedy. But I think wanting to stay home and work on other things was more a factor than the heart, because I kept doing it after the heart thing. I could have kept doing it after the heart, but
I think also just that psychology of like everyone kind of has, you've got the first decade of whatever your career is, you finish school, you're fucking around, you're playing with stuff, and you're kind of getting closer to who you are.
Yeah.
But change is also part of that. Like whether it's from stand-up, it could be anything.
Yeah.
And you're allowed to change, and you're allowed to be like, it's fun, but it's maybe not my forever thing.
Yeah.
But you do just want to know, that the reason if you're at home at 9 p.m. watching TV on your Wednesday, you're like, it's because I've chosen this life as opposed to the door was closed to me.
Exactly, yeah. And you can get outlet. Like I get outlets from so many other different ways and easier ways. Like I had some comedians come over the other day, and I do a podcast all about like online confessions. And so I'm like finding these, and then I have two mates come over, and they came over, and one of them just like picked up one of the microphones and just goes, I'm so jealous of you. And I was like, why? And she goes, I'm just coming up to Comedy Festival. I'm so stressed. And I was like, yeah. And there's like, this is the best outlet. She was just like, this is nice. You can do this from your own home. You can outsource it. You can do whatever you need to do. You can pay people to do things. You know, it's like, it's kind of a nice way to do it. But doing things on your own terms is so nice, where you can kind of just go, oh, I don't have to leave. I don't have to do this. And I'm 31 now. And I thought that I would have had my life figured out a lot sooner than that. But I was like, now I feel like I've got it together. I know what I'm doing. I'm not drinking too much. I'm not, I've got it together now, but I kind of thought I would have my shit together a lot earlier than I did. Not that I was a mess.
I think you're ahead of time, personally.
But not that I was a mess or anything. But, but I certainly see comedians where I'm like, oh, wow, you're still a fucker. Can you swear on this podcast?
You absolutely can.
You're not. You're a fucking mess, and you're a lot older than me, and you haven't got your shit together. And I honestly don't know how people do it, where you're like, if someone's waking up every day with a hangover, they've, been fucked up on something the night before, and they're waking up and they're doing that every day, and they're apologizing to people or just get past the point of apologizing to people. I just don't know how you can physically do that.
Do you think that sort of old characterization of the comedian who's very much that character is on its way out a little with the new generations of comics?
I think so, because there's brilliant people like Nina Oyama and Ree Down, and people who treat it like it's a job.
Yeah.
And I think that's a new thing, like a Luke McGregor or someone like that, where you go, oh, wow, like, these people are very sensible to a certain point. Like they still have fun and everything, but it's like it's a job now. And I don't think, I think that's where a lot of the bitterness comes from the older comedians who kind of go, oh, these people are getting these gigs and everything. And goes, yeah, because they care about it, and they care about the audience, and they want them to have a good time. They don't drink before they go on stage. I heard a great thing about someone who's like, I always saw this like rock star comedian that I grew up loving, and I was like, oh, how do you keep it together? And she goes, I just don't drink before I go on stage. And so I knew that very early on. You just don't drink before you go on stage. And then she goes, I'll have a bottle after.
Yeah.
But you don't do it before you go on stage, because she goes, I get up at 10. She goes, I've got time to have a bottle after, but I don't do it before I go on stage, because that's so disrespectful. And I think a lot of people don't think about the audience as much.
Who knew that being sober while doing your job would be a good idea?
It's wild. Isn't that wild though?
What a hot take. The Imposter Syndrome Club bringing everyone career advice.
I think they're just fucking salting.
Yeah.
But it's in the arts as well. Like that danger of like, for so many years, this romanticization of self-destruction. And I mean, I know I fucking bought that shit for so long. Like if I think about how many years in my 20s lost.
Yeah.
Because I was almost like uncreative enough to write a different version of that. And it's so cool seeing now that like being you can be a creative professional. These things are not mutually exclusive.
Absolutely. But how fun are those people to hang out with? Like when you're like early 20s, those people are so fun. I was always drawn to those people. Like I'm my friends call me like an addict. Like I'm addicted to addicts. I love addicts. Like and I think because my brother is an addict, I've always kind of like been drawn to people because I'm always I can fix them.
And you understand that energy. It's familiar to you.
Yeah, and I understand that there's really good times and really bad times. Like, you know, and as time goes on, they only become bad times. Like there's no real success stories that have come out of that. But I mean, for a lot of people, like I grew up idolizing comedians that were messed up. And those people, you go, they're so much fun to hang out with. And I was opening for all of these incredible and became friends with all of these incredible comedians that now I look back on, and people now when they see me always bring up these people and are like, oh my God, do you remember that night here? I go, yeah. You know, these stories that you have a shorthand with people now. Yeah. I find that, especially when do creative things, you have a shorthand with people where there's all this history. You can go, remember that night where you went on stage and had to pick up that person that was too drunk to perform? And you go, yeah, I remember. I thought that people would have, when they picked me up, would have gone, oh, he's gone down a slippery slope. Like oh yeah, he said he wasn't going to, but really got to him in the end, the drink.
I wanted to ask you, Sam, because I joked about listening to and watching your whole back catalogue, but I kind of did.
And wow.
I watched Fraud Fest.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Yesterday. I fucking loved it. It was great. Based in the fictional suburb of Coburg.
Coburg, that's right. Yeah.
Never heard of it. But just looking at the cast that you had on there, which is incredible.
Yeah.
So how did you flipping back to baby comedian Sam at 18, 19, how did you sort of first find your feet or find your community and connect with all of these incredible people?
Yeah, well,
from the start.
The reason, so I was like, when I was like 15, so I grew up on Phillip Island and we had no media department at all. Like even though the Hemsworth grew up there, we had no idea that you could go and do that as a career. Yeah, like, I'm not saying that I was a Hemsworth, but you know, I was in a play with Liam.
Kind of saying.
Yeah. But it was kind of like, there was no media department. There wasn't anything that you could go. It just wasn't something that you thought you could do. And my parents, because I was so supportive always, and because my brother had a lot of troubles, and they were kind of like, I guess, doing so much parenting with him that they kind of felt like they kind of neglected me for a bit. But I kind of felt like that was kind of the best. Because I could go, like they would just let me go on a bus and go to Melbourne when I was like maybe 15. And they bought me a camera. And so I started like filming things. Like I just started filming my friends, like making sketches. I remember one time we made like a tiny little short film and we sent it to Channel 31, which is an amazing community station in Melbourne. Sent it to them and they said it's rated MA 15 plus, like it's so full on. And I was like, oh, okay. So you can't legally watch what you made. Yeah. Like they were like, it's so full on. And I was like, oh yeah, like there was a blowjob joke in there. And I was like, I don't know what was going on. Like someone wiped toothpaste away from their mouth. And I was like, what is going on? Like I was just like, what? I don't know what we were thinking. We thought it was so funny, like all this stuff. And then we were like, well, I wanted to do something else. So I started just contacting comedians that I liked. I started contacting like, you know, Glenn Robbins, who was like, you know, Russell Coyton, you know, having this idea of someone. And he said, yeah, I'll do a sketch. So I got the bus up to Melbourne. I did a sketch with Glenn Robbins and then I started sending them into Channel 31 and they started going, oh, he's getting like comedians in these sketches. They can put them in between other shows, like, you know, do a little sketch here of me, you know, the sketch I think was me saying I've got really good celebrity senses. Like when I'm in Melbourne, I've got such good celebrity senses. I just know when a celebrity's coming. And then Glenn Robbins walks up and goes, hey mate, how are you? And I'm going, yeah, fine. And then I keep doing the introduction. And it was just little stuff where I was like, I'll just keep building on that. I kept doing that. And then, you know, I tried to reach out to people like Genevieve Morris and, you know, never heard back from her agent. I tried to reach out to anyone that I was a huge fan of. I reached out to them and nearly all of them said yes. You know, nearly all of them said yes. And then I just kept doing that. And then I met Fiona O'Loughlin, who I was just such a big fan of. And she was just the nicest comedian that I'd ever met. Like I walked up to her and her manager was there. And it was like a comedy night or something. I was way too young to be there. And she was standing there and I said to her, oh, hi, and the manager put his hand in my face and said, no, we're talking to networks, fuck off. And I was like, oh, okay. And like I kind of like, shrunken. You know that Arrested Development, like someone walking away and that sad music plays? It was kind of like that. I was walking out and Fiona O'Loughlin ran after me down the stairs and said, darling, what happened? Are you okay? And I was like, oh no, I got told. And she goes, meet me at this place in 10 minutes. I'll come and do whatever you want. And so then she let me film a sketch with her, stayed in contact with her. And then I ended up making a documentary about her. It was a 5-minute documentary called Lady O'Loughlin. And that did well in film festivals. It was like a short film. And so then I got chosen to go to like Canberra and be like a thing. I think it was called the Australian Talented Youth Project or something in Canberra. And they didn't have a tutor for me. Everyone else had a tutor. There was like dancers who had a tutor. There was everything. They just wanted me to kind of film the whole thing. So every time I was having dinner, they were like, Every time I was having dinner, they're like, oh, why aren't you filming? I was like, I didn't know I had to. Like,
I'm so
hungry. Please, one meal. And then I came back to Melbourne and a friend of mine wanted to do comedy and I was like, he wanted to do stand-up. And I was kind of like, that sounds so terrifying. I loved watching it, but he was doing it. And he contacts a guy called Greg Fleet, who was like just the best stand-up in the world. Like I just saw him and just went, oh my God, there's no one better than him. And he contacted him and he said, do you want to come along with me and help me write some jokes? So I was like helping him write jokes. I would have been like 18 and I was helping him write jokes, getting the bus up still, like just writing jokes. And then Greg said to me one day, he was like, why don't you do it? I think you're funnier than your friend. And I was like, oh, no, I don't think I could do that. And then I saw him 6 months later, I ran into him and he said, have you thought about doing stand-up? And I was like, no. And then he goes, well, I'm going to book you a gig and you just have to do it. And so he booked me a gig, which if anyone knows Greg Fleet, is like him with admin is not the greatest suit. So him to actually book something is incredible. And so he booked me a gig and then he said, meet me at the Exford Hotel at this time and I'll help you write like a 5-minute set. And so I started to write it out and did like 5 minutes of comedy and I was like, this will be great. Like I'll just do 5 minutes and I did it and I wrote it and then he invited all my friends and everything and I put it on. It was great. And then the second one, like I said before, was to 2 people who absolutely hated me. I walked out and one person just yelled out, "You're shit," before I even started talking. But then I was so positive. I was like, I've still got like 50% of the audience. So I'll just do it to that one. I'll just do it to that one other person. So
Way to reframe, Sammy.
Yeah. So I did it to that one person and they weren't a real big, they didn't like it either really. They couldn't even speak English. I remember I had to run and talk to them and they didn't. And so I kept doing it and I kept doing it. And the whole time I was like, I'm going to be a filmmaker. I'm going to, I really want to do this. But the whole time I was kind of like, and then you become like addicted to working out how to do it because you've been watching it for such a long time. And then you're like, I really want to work out how to do it and I want to get good at doing it. And then, I started doing the filmmaking stuff and, you're working on commercials and it's so boring. Like you're like, there's no creative outlet for you, but that's how to make the money. Like you make the money from doing the things that you're not that passionate about. Then everything else is kind of great. So, so I was, doing that and then at night I was doing stand-up and I was kind of like, I'll do that for as long as I want to do it. And then that became like 7 or 8 years of me doing stand-up, working a job, and trying to make it as a comedian, but also like hoping that someone would call me a filmmaker in between.
Yeah.
And go, you can actually do this now. Well, yeah. So that's kind of how I got started.
How did you think about going from someone who'd watched so much comedy and is clearly really passionate about it, and then, as you say, trying to deconstruct that in a way to understand what the mechanism is? Because I would imagine in the beginning you're like, some stuff's funny, some stuff's not funny. I don't know. It's just like a mystical thing that happens. Like you throw shit at the wall and like some stuff sticks. Is there like, how does that become more refined or professional? How did you develop your ear for that? Or is it literally just trial and error.
It's kind of trial and error. Like I don't think anyone has like a secret. Like, you know, I think people try and say that there's comedy masterclasses and you can do this and you can do that. But a lot of the time it's just you actually just have to keep getting up. And it's awful to go, oh my God, the stage time and because they always go, you have to find your voice. Like you have to find your voice, which is how you present on stage. And I found mine very quickly. And I remember a lot of comedians around going, you're so lucky you found it, because I'm still working on mine and I'm still trying to find that out. But I was kind of like, I just knew what I wanted to be on stage. And that was to be a nice person that just wasn't an asshole and didn't punch down. And so I was like, I know who I am. I want to do this. And then you're trying to write jokes and you're trying to do it to match who you are. And so I think it's just about getting up, and you just have to keep getting up, you know, as much as possible, because you're only going to get better through stage time. It's like exercise. The more you do it, the better you are. And it's horrible because some days you don't feel like doing it. You're like, I don't want to do this. But then that muscle, you just have to keep working on that muscle and getting better at it. And so when you take time off, you come back and you're so rusty and you don't really remember how to do it and everything's kind of a mess. But writing jokes is I think once you do it and you find out how to, I guess, where the big laugh is, sometimes you get up and you tell a joke and the audience don't laugh in the way you thought they would and you're shocked. I've certainly had things where I'm like, oh my God, that's the best joke ever, and no
You're
one
all
likes it.
idiots.
You're all idiots. Yeah, how dare all of you. And I've kept it in for so long. Like I remember doing one joke for 6 months and it never got a laugh. And I just was like, nah, people are wrong. And then you get so cocky and you're like, no, you're wrong. You just don't, you'll never master this. And I think that's the most amazing thing, like going back to when I mentioned Will Anderson before, thinking I'm his best mate. When someone like him, he still says, I've never mastered my art and I will never master my art.
Wow.
And you think if someone like that or Judith Lucy says it, then you go, yeah, well, if they're the best comedians I think Australia has ever produced. So if they're saying it, then you have a lot of thinking to do, you know, and you've got a lot.
Yeah.
You've got to. If you think you've mastered it, then you're probably barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah, it's this brutal and like incredibly boring thing that the answer is always like practice over time. Like, but I want the get rich quick scheme version.
Yeah.
But I think the brutal thing about comedy, so it's the same with drawing. Like people think there's some magic to it, like you're born with this innate skill, but a lot of it's just like memory and muscle memory and having a steady hand and just drawing the same thing over and over again. But it doesn't require an audience. I mean, you can do it in front of an audience, but I don't need that to tell me if it's working or not. Whereas for stand-up, you do. So you have to do all that practice bit in front of someone else, which is kind of brutal.
Yeah, and it can be terrifying. Like when a gig's not going well, it's just awful. You know, like it's just like, oh, why am I here? And you're looking at your watch. I remember one time me and a friend were doing a show and wanted to leave halfway through. Like we both looked at each other and just went, we should just go.
Have you ever done that? Have you ever like just cut a whole segment out? You're like, fucking, absolutely. I'm done.
Yeah. I've tried. I remember doing one gig where people obviously wanted me to leave. And I was like, I'm just going to stick it out for a bit. And I remember doing another minute and then I went, nah. And it was like a football club in Melton and I was like, I'm not your person. And that's okay. Dave Hughes was on. He's your person. I'm not your person. And I think that's hard because you go, you know, I used to be a big people pleaser and I used to go, oh, I want to make everyone like me. And then you go, no one is like that. Like, you know, not everyone is liked by everyone. A friend told me a while ago, you can't be everyone's cup of tea, but you can be someone's shot of whiskey. And I like that so much more to go, oh yeah, you can, being someone's shot of whiskey is like the best thing in the world because you get excited about that. And, you know, I think it's the same as dating. It's like, you know, when you're going on heaps of dates and you're like, you know, and sometimes it just doesn't work or you don't find a spark or a connection with someone. And then there's that one person where you're like, oh, you're their shot of whiskey, and that's what they were looking for as well. But I find that the same thing. It's like, you know, with stand-up, wanting to leave halfway through or doing like 10 minutes and it feeling like it's 50. Yeah. And you look at the clock and you go, oh no. I still have that sometimes with like doing a podcast sometimes. I looked at my my recorder the other day. I thought it was an hour and it was 20 minutes.
Oh boy.
And I usually have a really good gauge with that sort of stuff. And I looked and I was just like, there is no way. And I was like, and I wrapped it up real quick. I was just like, oh, if this is this in 20 minutes, like imagine what it's like in 50 or however long you record for. It's that horror of going, oh no, I have to keep going.
Do you have quite a good gauge for in the moment knowing when it's going to make a good episode afterwards? Or do you listen back and surprise yourself? Because we're still learning that. We have conversations which we're like, well, that's fucked.
Yeah,
that's the end of it.
Never release it.
Yeah,
it's
never
terrible.
release it. Yeah. Sometimes I've been surprised a few times by episodes where I was like, that was nothing. And then you come back and you're like, people love it. You're like, oh, okay. Like it was a bit flatter or it was there wasn't much to it or there weren't enough jokes. And then people just really liked it because it was very natural or something. Or, you know, you could hear the pauses and maybe that was what people wanted that day or you can never tell. But yeah, sometimes when I'm recording one, I'm just going, oh, no. And then when I start pulling out stories, I'm like, oh, here we fucking go. Because I think I had someone editing for me that was just going, oh my God, I know when it's tough for you. Because they go, here comes one of his stories. And I was like, that's great that you go, oh, here comes one of his stories. But that's why I always think that you kind of, when you've got the confidence to be like, I can make this funny. And if you guys add to it, that's great. But if you don't want to, then I will kind of work harder.
Yeah.
And if I'm working really hard, I think it's a bad episode because I'm like, I'm working overtime, doing a lot of the heavy lifting over here and I'm making a lot of the jokes that they're not. You know, like if I'm making a lot of the jokes going, that's weirdly worded, you know, that sort of stuff where I'm picking apart a lot of stuff that's happening, then it's like, and it's never the guest's fault either. It's like, it's never the audience's fault either. Like sometimes you walk away from a gig, like I remember when I was doing it going, they sucked. And you go, no, you probably sucked, mate.
Yeah.
You were probably not the greatest tonight.
Or your comparison earlier of dating is a great one where it's actually like no one sucked, but sometimes it's not the fucking right moment and it's not the right combination and it's okay. Yeah. It's actually okay.
And you're not a bad person or you're not, you know.
There's nothing to fix.
No. And a lot of people beat themselves up about all that sort of stuff and it's like, you're not the problem. And you've got to move on real quick as well from a bad gig or a bad date. You've got to move on so quick because there's going to be – they always say in comedy you're only as good as your last gig and that's so true. It's like you're only as good as the last thing you did and so you just have to get up and do the next one. I was always like terrified. Like if I was doing a gig and it was bad, I would go, oh, I need to do another one tonight or I need to do another one tomorrow night. Like I just need to get back up there and then the next one is always amazing because you're so terrified of it being bad that you actually try a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Which is why I think I should have always done a gig in Melton the night before at a football club.
Your go-to
warm-up show. Every
Melton
night.
Footy Club.
Yeah.
Oh my
You've been great. Enjoy the veal. I remember once doing a gig and Dave Hughes came in for a surprise spot and was like, can I go on before you? And I was like, no, I'm not going on after you. And then he was like, I've got to go to something else. So the person booking the room put him on first. So everyone paid attention. Like it was that Lucky Cock. It was that, oh God, I don't know why I did that room so much. It was there. So people are having pizza. Then all of a sudden it's like Dave Hughes is on. So people are paying attention to Dave Hughes. And then I got on straight on after him. And most of my gig was asking people to stay.
Oh God!
Going, stay for me.
Sammy,
I'm really good. I promise. I'm really good. If you get to know me, I'm really good.
Oh, you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it.
Yeah. Just in Melton, please. I need this.
Everyone loves a bit of desperation on that Saturday night.
It's fun.
That's an interesting kind of thing. I think like the dynamics, and I've never met Dave Hughes. I'm not here to hang shit on him necessarily.
I've talked about him heaps on this podcast for some reason.
Great.
Obsessed with him.
I have no idea who
he's wearing a Dave.
Don't even worry about it. Yeah.
You can't see this, but Sammy's wearing a Dave Hughes t-shirt.
Yeah. Always. Can't stop talking about it.
Yeah.
And another thing about Dave Hughes.
But I'm not saying that this is necessarily Dave Hughes, but it might be. But when you're operating in an industry where I'm sure ego plays a big role in like what you are and aren't allowed to ask of other people.
Yeah.
And just desperately trying to tie it back somewhat to imposter syndrome.
Let's see.
Navigating that world as a newer comedian or the next generation of comedians, and obviously you've got some experiences with people like Will and Fiona who've been incredibly generous and give people a leg up and make it easy. Who's your best friend?
Said it something. So not just saying it will make it.
That's how I'm pretty sure that's how friendships work. Yeah, you say it enough times and it makes it true.
I say Will Anderson 3 times in the mirror and he shall appear. There he is. Hey Will, great to see you, my best friend.
We'll edit that
Love
in.
you. Yeah.
It's just Photoshop him into this conversation.
Yeah. I only feel comfortable with my best friends.
But I imagine there's lovely people who lift you up, and then I imagine there's a kind of ugly side to that as well, where there are people who, I imagine are quite territorial or something. Did you sort of experience that through the industry?
A lot of that. I always found the industry was very toxic. And I think that's one of the reasons I couldn't call myself a comedian, because I found that I remember when I first started, so Greg Fleet was really pushing me a lot, and we started a podcast together, and that did well because it was kind of in that time when podcasting was kind of new, and it was kind of that, comedy community kind of got around it and everything. And then that was something, and then people started to say, you're only getting those opportunities because of Greg Fleet, or you're only getting those opportunities because of Fiona O'Loughlin, and so that, I think the fact with me was that I was friends with them. It wasn't like I was, this person that was asking them for opportunities all the time. We got along really well, and it was the same as other comedians that I got along with really well and are still friends with. But because they had a name or they had, something attached to them, then I started getting, people being quite bitter about that and saying, you got a leg up and I didn't get a leg up, and, you're only getting these opportunities for this reason. And I remember one night I got booked to do like a feature spot at this gig, and the guy, I can't remember his name, but he put up on the poster, it was like Fiona O'Loughlin on the poster, and then it was me. And I was like, well, that's like, they don't need to bill me or anything because I'm not a name like Fiona. I haven't got the experience or anything. And they didn't write my name. They wrote Greg Fleet's mate on the poster. So it went out to people, and I had someone message me the poster and just said, this is awful. Do you want me to say something? And I was like, oh no, don't say anything. And my friend had a huge fight with this person just saying, this is awful. This is a really bad way to do it. And that really hurt because I was like, I'm my own person. I've tried really hard. And I think being Greg Fleet's friend or Fiona's friend was a hindrance more than it was a leg up, because they, people weren't trusting them as much. Like there were always issues. There was something going on, and I was always helping them with everything. So for them to say, oh, you're only getting this gig because of Greg Fleet, I was like, well, Greg Fleet's not getting gigs, and and there's a lot going on with him, and
that thing that like that very toxic thing as well, where people use essentially what is bullying, but hide it behind this idea of a joke.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's always like the number one bully tactic is like, I was just fucking relax, man. I was just joking. Like, no, but when you're not. And like, that's such a.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just to that friend's point, I feel like it's such a circular argument because like people are friends. I feel like people tend to find friends at whatever you do. Yeah. You connect with people that kind of do it at the same level. Like it just works that way. So it's like they're not going to have found whatever they saw in you. Maybe you had less experience, but like I just don't think that they're not going to fucking do it as a charity case. They're doing it because they feel a connection, which means you're clearly working at there's some kind of resonance there. So I don't know. I feel like it's such a self-defeating argument to be like, it's because you're friends. You're like, you're friends because you fucking get
along with people.
Yeah, exactly. And put yourself out there. You know what I mean? Like, maybe someone else didn't have the courage to go up and talk to Fiona O'Loughlin.
Yeah.
And then, your relationship developed from there because you had the guts to ask in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's, yeah. I agree. It's bullshit.
It's bullshit. It's
fuck
damn
that
bullshit.
guy. Justice
for Sam.
Yeah. So Sam, I was wondering, with your filmmaking and your comedy background, like in what way do they feed into each other? Is there like a link with storytelling, or is it a completely separate part of your brain?
Yeah, well, not really. I mean, they're all kind of intertwined. Like I'm self-taught in both of those areas. Like I never went to film school. I never did any of that. So I'm very like I'll work it out. I'll find out how to do it myself, and I'll be better at it because I'm doing that. The comedy stuff. So I haven't made that much comedy content. Like I'm not big on making like a comedy film or something like that because it's like there's so much work in it and you've got to do it all yourself and everything, and funding's really hard, and there's all that stuff where you like to make something really good, you need funding, you need to do all of that. But editing, I found that I was good at comedy editing because I think with timing and doing stand-up, you get really good at knowing where the laugh is and where the laugh needs to stop. So I found that I was good at editing other people's comedy stuff because I was like, oh, that's something that I know how to do, and I know how to film funny things for other people and edit them and make them funny. But putting my own stuff in there is hard because I'm a bit more critical, I think, of that. But when it's someone else's stuff, I can kind of punch it up and make it a little bit funnier if they need that. And documentary is kind of the same because it's all about timing. And I think that's what everything is. It's all about timing. It's all about not overstaying your welcome, getting out. Because with stand-up, you never want to be there longer than – you always want to leave on a high.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing with comedy and with documentary stuff and all of it is that you don't want to overstay your welcome. So it's like figuring out how long a pause is, figuring out, when to linger on something and when to cut away because maybe you've lingered on a shot for way too long and you're like, cut out because now it's getting boring. But then there's and I think it's the same with like any like design or like graphic design work. They always talk about like, anti-design, and sometimes that works as well. Sometimes it works to linger on something for 2 minutes where you should only linger on it for 30 seconds because 2 minutes kind of makes people uncomfortable for a bit and then it makes them happy again towards the end of it, or, but that's the same thing about stand-up is that it's like, oh, you can make something funny and then it becomes very unfunny. It's unfunny, and then it becomes funny again. And I think you have to be very clever to do that. Not everyone can do it. I certainly failed a lot at doing that.
It's such a specific thing. So some years ago, did you know the comedian Brody Stevens?
No.
It's not with us anymore, but an American comedian, very, very funny, very surrealist. And my husband Dan and I saw him at the Comedy Store in LA, and the first 2 minutes of his act, he just played the tambourine on stage. And so it started funny and then it got really unfunny and then it got really funny again. And I reckon it did that dip up and down about 3 times.
Yeah.
It's such a weird – because everyone the whole audience experiences that wave together at the same time. I don't know why it's happening, but it's like –
also because it takes so much courage. I think that as an audience member – and I guess the same applies with art as well, is like as an audience member, you're seeing someone – embody something that part of you is relating to and wishing you had yourself.
Yeah.
And it's often the courage to like make a big splash on a canvas or make whatever joke or you're getting to project yourself a bit into that bravery.
Yeah.
And that the funny into unfunny into funny, you're just watching someone have the fucking courage to do that.
Yeah,
like, oh my God, that's so stressful.
Yeah, the confidence to be able to sit in silence is huge.
In that discomfort. And
it's hard to do in everyday life as well to sit in silence, I find. Like it's, anything where you're like, I've gotten a lot better at being comfortable in silence, but it takes a long time and a lot of work sometimes when you're sitting with someone that you're just like, oh my God, they're not giving anything. And you're like, oh, well, they're not giving anything. I shouldn't have to do all of the work here. But sometimes you're just like, I'll just talk. It's easier if I just talk for ages. Pull one out of my fucking stories out again. Yeah. Exactly. Pull out one of my stories again. Here he goes.
Yeah. It is a weird, because I'm so rarely in silence, even just with my own thoughts. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm listening to usually podcasts or music or something. The only time really that I'm in silence is like the first hour of the morning because I get up. I'm a very early bird.
Right.
So I get up early and I usually do an hour of work before I go to the gym in the morning.
Right.
Just because I feel like it's my special magic time
Yeah.
where I can get ahead, do whatever I want with.
Yeah.
And that's really the only time of the day that I sit in silence.
Yeah,
and
wow.
being in silence with another person is kind of confronting.
It is.
Yeah.
And you have to get really comfortable with that person before you like sit in silence for like an hour or I lived with someone for a long time And we were really good at sitting in silence. Like, my friend, he was a comedian, and I always just thought, oh no, it's going to be really hard. I'm living with a comedian. Like, they're probably going to want to talk all the time. And they did not want to talk all the time. So we got really good, and it's still really comfortable if we go out for a drink or something. We're still really good at not talking.
That's nice.
Which I think is nice. It's nice to have
it's
nice to have another friend who's also like, I'm happy not to talk.
Yeah.
I have to do this thing sometimes because I've been working on this in my own life and I'm so bad at it. And the second there's a gap, it's like I turn into this insane clown that has to like, I'll do anything. I'll set myself on fire, like anything to fill the gap. And I'm like, this is crazy and needs to stop.
Yeah.
So now in my head, what I do is I make myself be quiet, but then just inside my mind, I'm just going, la, 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 like behind my eyes. That's what's happening. And I'm like in pots and pans.
Yeah.
Just push through it.
Whatever makes you comfortable at the end of the day.
It's working. What do you love about filmmaking?
I love how I love how it makes people feel, I think. I like working out how to do it. Because it's like that, what you brought up before. So I made a comedy film 2 years ago and I self-funded it. I filmed it all myself. I edited it all myself. I did everything myself. And it was I really liked, when I was growing up, I really liked films like Best in Show and Waiting for Guffman and A Mighty Wind and all of those Christopher Guest films, which were improvised comedy films. And I loved them. I just thought they were so funny. And then I thought there are so many comedians in Australia or just actors or improvisers or whatever they are, whatever they're comfortable calling themselves. And they're really great at doing that. And I think that we have the talent here to do what they do. We have a Jennifer Coolidge, we have a Jane Lynch, we have all of these people that are so good at doing them. And I was like really passionate to make that happen here because I'm so passionate about those films. But then when you make something all by yourself, it is stressful. You're funding the whole thing yourself. Obviously making something without a budget is really hard and you only want to take up 2 hours of someone's time or, you're really conscious of all that stuff. And I think that obviously takes away a little bit from what you're able to do and you can't find the right ending because what you want to do isn't possible. It's not feasible for how much money you have. And I reckon I probably spent about $10,000 making my own comedy film. That's not perfect in any way. It's far from perfect and there's things I would change and everything, but I assembled the best people that I could have assembled and I did it all myself and I'm very proud of that, but it is no way perfect. I heard someone talk about it on a podcast the other day and I was like honored that they were talking about it, but they went out of their way to find it and they said, it's not perfect, but check it out. And I was like, that's probably the best way to sum it up because it's like it's not perfect, but it's great that that all these people came together and did it and liked doing it. I think because every scene was filmed twice. I just said, here's what happens in this scene, and they did it. Here's a joke if you want one, and they used it or they didn't, and then moved on. And I had 2 hours with every person pretty much, and just did it like that. And I think the joy from me comes from things that, like if I wrote the whole thing, it wouldn't be as fun. It wouldn't be as, interesting for me to film. And I think that's why I make documentaries more because you don't know what's going to happen and you're filming a lot of shit that probably won't be in it. Like you're filming a lot of wasted stuff, but in the moment you're going, this could be the moment. Like this could be the great moment. And I think because I'm making it exciting for myself. Yeah, I think the writing is in the editing when you're making something that's improvised or a documentary. You're writing it as you're editing it. But for other things, you have to write everything. People are so careful about how everything's worded. People are really economic with their wording and it's really structured. And I don't really like structure. I get very scared of structure because I'm like, I don't need it. I don't know, and then you go, absolutely do. But I'll work it out. I'll work it out later.
Yeah.
And I think that chaos, but controlled chaos, is what I really like about filmmaking because you're like, oh, it's a mess and I know it's a mess and I know I've filmed 80 hours of stuff and I know it can only be an hour and a half or I know it can only be a certain amount. And when I made the comedy film, I would sit down with someone who is like my comedy idol. I would sit down with them once a week and they would watch my edits, and they watched a 4-hour version of the film. They watched a 3.5 hour. Every time I'd cut it down by half an hour. And they sat through every single thing and watched it and gave me notes. It was the best experience of my life. Like, it's the best. Yeah, it's all downhill from here. it was one of the best experiences of my life because I was going, it was so freeing and so nice. And I made a documentary that I ended up I was in a lawsuit over it, and it was just a really stressful time, and I never wanted to make anything again. I was like, oh no, I'm done. And I was done. I was just like, I'm never going to make anything again because this is so stressful. And it was like 6 weeks of high stress where lawyers were coming after me. I ended up losing a lot of money on lawyers.
God.
And then I was like, after that, I was like, I'm just going to make a comedy film.
Yeah.
You know, with people that I love.
Yeah. Little palate cleanser.
Yeah. And it was like, I'll only invite people that I love.
Yeah.
And I'll only film with people that I love. And so every day I was just like, oh my God, I get to wake up today and this person's coming to my house and we're going to film this little bit. And then the next day I was like, oh my God. And I took 6 weeks off work. I had a full-time job. I took 6 weeks off and I was like, I'm just going to make this film. I filmed it all in 6 weeks. And I was like, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to focus on it. I'm just going to spend all my money and I'm just going to do it.
Wait, how old were you when you did this?
I was 28. Yeah. And I was like, I'm just going to.
So fucking cool. You're like, I'm just going to take 6 weeks off. I'm going to make a thing.
Yeah, I'm just going to make something.
I'm going to make
that time.
to make a thing. And then there'll be a thing in the world. And as you say, not perfect, but if the options are perfect or nothing, then nothing would ever happen.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people go, it could fail or it could be a massive flop and stuff. And in terms of money, it was a massive flop because I couldn't get into film festivals. I finished it just before the pandemic hit, so no film festivals were happening. So it never went anywhere. And I was kind of like, fuck. And then I found out through doing my podcast that people started contacting me saying, I want to watch this because you've spoken about it. And so then people started watching it. And then it got mentioned recently on a podcast, a really popular podcast, and they were talking about it. So more people started watching it. And so a friend of mine reached out and said, I've got a website. Do you want me to just put it up on the website? I was like, great, just put it up there. And just, if it has a home, I'm really happy. And then, I'm so happy when someone reaches out and say, they're just like, I loved watching it. And they always say, I know what you were trying to do. Like, it's like, I know what you were trying to do. It's not perfect. Yeah. I get lots of backhand compliment. But I take everything as a compliment.
I was going to say
that?
Half the audience loved it.
Yeah, half the audience loved it. Everything's a compliment. But I was like, that's really nice when people reach out and say, I liked that. And I know what you were trying to do and I know how hard that is, or, especially filmmakers reaching out going, I tried to do that. Or I tried to do what you tried to do. Like, and that's really nice to go, oh yeah. And I'm just lucky enough to know the funniest people I think in the world. So I'm like, I've got the advantage of going, I already know all of these people. I can just ask them to come and film something. Like, I said before, Genevieve Morris, who, I tried to reach out to so many times and nothing. Because I never got through the management. I never got through. And then, and then you get to work with someone like that who is the funniest person in the world and also just the funniest person to get drunk with, or the funniest person. I always go and stay at her house and we get really drunk, and you just go, and when you look out at someone like that, and I'm sorry, it does sound like I'm name dropping when I say a name, but it's like when you see someone like that who I grew up watching, and I go, she's the funniest person I've ever seen, the funniest person. And, next week she's going down to my hometown. She's just staying there. She's going to go and hang out with my mum. And my mum is like such a huge fan of hers. Like, she's like, oh my God, like I don't know what it would be like to hang out with her. And it was those sorts of people that I was like, if I only reach out to those sorts of people and say, and everyone said yes that I asked, which was incredible that I had to go and have a drink with every single person that I was asking to be in it. But then I was like, well, they're also my friends. So it's actually just meeting up with a friend and having a drink and going, also, I'm going to do this thing. And I met up with one of them and I was like, he goes, yeah, great. Oh, I'll be in it, of course, an actor. And I was like, I'll be in it, of course. And then the next day I messaged him the filming dates. And he goes, oh, I didn't think you'd do it. Like I thought, of course I'll do it if you ever do it, but I don't know you actually doing it. I'm like, I'm just going to do it. And I was just like, if I don't, it's that thing of going, oh, if you don't jump now, you're never going to jump at all. And it's like, if I'll just do it tomorrow. I'll just start that tomorrow. Put in my leave and I was like, I'm just going to do it tomorrow.
Oh man, good for you. That's incredible. So two things. I really enjoyed
it. Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And I actually said to my husband after, because I was like, oh, what do you think? It's cool. It said in Coburt.
Coburt, yeah.
And I was like, it's kind of like a Christopher Guest film.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I said was, it looks like it would have been so fun to make.
Yeah.
So obviously some of that, the fact that you're doing it with people that you genuinely love, that you're having a good time, something about that comes through.
Yeah.
Really lovely.
That's great. That's lovely to hear. I mean, I don't often look back. It's kind of hard to look back on stuff and go, oh, I remember this and I'm always like, I'm really busy all the time. I always keep moving. But the other night when it was like nearly the new year, I was like, oh my God, I remember when I did that comedy film. And I went back and I've got all these archives of footage and I watched not all of the stuff, but I watched a lot of the stuff that didn't make it in. And it is so funny because there's parts that couldn't make it in because it was way too messed up, some of the stuff that people were saying, or some of the ways the characters went were just nuts. But watching it again, it's like, oh, wow, there was that bit that I didn't put in or this bit that I didn't put in, and there's all this stuff and most of it, the stuff that didn't make it in is because I was laughing too much and the camera kind of moves, and a lot of outtakes where I usually got a friend of mine to hold another camera for a lot of the scenes. So I didn't have to take it again. And then they start laughing, so then it's my camera. And then I start laughing, so it's their camera. And just stuff like that where you're like, it is so nice to look back and go, oh, there were really funny moments with people I love. And like, and anytime I see any of them, they always bring up one thing that happened in it that made them laugh more than anything. And that's kind of a joy where they're like, and also people who I know that don't know each other. And then I was putting one person in a room with someone else that I love, and it was two people that I love in a room together, and they're making each other cry laughing.
Oh, it's the best feeling.
It's so nice.
It's the best feeling.
It's so nice.
Yeah.
It's like when you set two people up, two friends of yours that you're like, I love these two people. I think they're going to love each other too. And and it's perfect. And you're like, this is so nice. Or you invite heaps of friends around and none of them know each other. And it's like, this is really nice because I know exactly who you're going to like.
You feel like you're giving them a present because as an adult, it's hard making friends.
Absolutely.
And when you're like, I've curated these beautiful humans, you're all amazing. I've done the hard work. Just put them all in one place. You're like, now go.
Now go. You frolic. Live your best life. Yeah. But it is hard to make friends, I think, or just close yourself off, I think, at a certain point and go, I'm closed off to new friends, or I'm not gonna. I'm full. I can't take any more new friends because I put a lot of effort into friendship. So I always go, I'll see a friend at least every second night. Like I put a lot of effort into friendships, and then I go, I can't take any more. Full up for the year.
There are no vacancies.
I'm so sorry. But then you meet people and it's like through a podcast or through whatever you're doing, and you're like, oh, I'd love to be your friend. Or, those sorts of things where you go, you keep meeting all these amazing people and you go, oh my God. And then it's like texting someone that you're in love with. You go, so I really enjoyed the podcast today. And they go, I really enjoyed it too. And you go, do you want to, maybe we can have a drink? Maybe if you want to come around for dinner one night
or like catch up. Catch up is always the phrase I use. It's like could be meeting, but there's no time frame.
There's no
so you're kind of like, we should catch up. We should catch up sometime.
We should catch up sometime.
That could be tomorrow or also in 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I've made so many lifelong friends even through my podcast and stuff where I'm like, I didn't expect to be a friend of that person or for them to think of me as a friend or them to know my name or them, it's that sort of stuff where you're like, oh, it's really lovely that sometimes you meet people that you go, oh, I didn't know that we would be a friend, or a friend. I can't even talk. I didn't know that we would be friends, or I didn't know that we would have that relationship after like an hour.
Yeah. That's very lovely. I love making new friends. It's so funny that you say that too, Sammy. I think it was just last week on the podcast we were talking about exactly that, how like, we've been hanging out with a friend and get that sort of like vulnerability hangover of do they love me?
Yeah, do they love me?
Did that go well?
Yeah. Did they love me?
I had a great time. Do you think they had a great time? I should text them. Text them and ask them.
Well, I remember getting pulled up by an ex-girlfriend who was like once goes, it's so weird that you message your friends after hanging out with them. Because I always send all my friends messages saying I had the best time tonight. Yeah.
It's the best. I'm like 5 stars.
Yeah.
Let's do this again.
And they were like, it's so weird. I don't do that with any of my friends. I go, so you just leave it? Like I always message and go, I had the best time. I can't wait to see you again, or something like that, little X. And you're like, it's so nice. And then they write back and they're like, I had a great time too. Can't wait to do it again. Or, something like that. And you're like, it just gives you that extra little, you've had the best time hanging out with your friend.
Yes.
And then you get that little text and you're like, that's nice.
It's like aftercare after sex. It's just the little cuddle so that
spoon.
it's like that was good. We're good. We're on the same page.
Yeah.
That was good. We're fine.
Yeah.
We love each other. It's okay.
Not leave my house and never come back.
Yeah. I'm just going to get a coffee.
I'm just going to get a coffee. Yeah.
Gonna go pick up some milk.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Whatever.
No, you go, Alice.
Okay. I wanted to ask, because a few times it's come up in different ways, but and you kind of joke about everything's a compliment.
Yeah.
And you've got this really, I find it like I'm really amazed and intrigued by this kind of ability to frame things positively, and the fact that you keep showing up, you keep doing the thing, you keep kind of putting yourself out there. Is that a way that you've always been? Is that a thing that you've worked on? Is it a bit of both?
I think it's just because I'm so happy to be here. Like I was born with facial palsy, and so I lost a few of the nerves on the left side of my face. When I smile, I don't get the full lift on this side. And I remember my mum told me a story that she was just so sad when she found that out, because she was like, oh, he's going to struggle. He's going to be bullied, or, like all this stuff. And I never was. I just never was bullied. Because I always like made the joke before the bully, or, all that stuff that you hear about, all the cliches. But I was just so excited right from the moment when I found out I could do something, or that it wasn't impossible to do something. And I think it's because I'm a little bit stupid, but also it's also like blind ambition. I got into psychology. That was what I was going to do. And I did 2 weeks or something. I got into RMIT and I was like, I'm going to move to Melbourne. I'm going to do this and it's going to be my life and everything. And I think my dad still says that I'm in my gap year. Like he's just like, you just never really, and I'm very proud of the fact that I've been able to support myself the whole time. I've been able to make money. I've been able to do things, been able to travel. And that's all through not having a university degree has meant, sure, that some jobs I've gone for that I haven't got. But a lot of the time I've got stuff that I'm like, well, maybe, they just saw my skills and they kind of liked me more, or, I'm always like, if I can get in a room with someone, I know that maybe I'm a bit personable, or they'll see that I'm being nice, or, whatever it is. That sounds so methodical that I'm like, they'll see that I'm nice. but it is so like, I don't know. I didn't have the easiest childhood. And so not because it was just my brother and everything, and we had restraining orders on him, and it just became this whole thing, and it wasn't easy. And so I remember having that feeling going, I always feel homesick, mostly at home. Like I've always feel homesick when I'm at home. When I'm out of home, I'm so excited, and I'm so excited to be somewhere. And so going up to Melbourne, getting the bus up to Melbourne, I was so excited to do that when I was young. Like I was so excited to do that. And then meeting friends and meeting people, and then meeting my idols, and it was all exciting. And I genuinely say this, I've never, ever been bored. You know how people they go, oh, I'm so bored. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to watch. I'm like, I've never been bored ever. Like a friend is doing something that I love, or a friend is sending me something. I'm watching that, and then I'm moving on to something else. And my days are always really well organized. So I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing that. Like today I'm going to film for a few hours. I'm going to film something for a friend that is just like, I just want to try this thing out and I don't have any money. And I was like, I'll just do it. Like, because I'm like, well, I've got a few hours free. I can just go and film it for you and you can see if it's a thing and see if that works. So I'm always trying to give people that sort of like, oh, you can do it. You just need to actually physically do it. And a lot of people go, it's too hard. I won't do it, or, it'll cost me money or whatever it is. But I'm always like, I've never gotten down about, things, because it's like, well, there's always something else, and you've always got tomorrow, and you'll wake up tomorrow and something else will be amazing. And you should never let fear get in the way or be the reason you don't do something, because the scariest time is also the best time as well. Like it's I always am not afraid of being in a moment where it's kind of stressful, because you're like, well, I know that I have a way out of this. If I'm doing a podcast and it's not going very well, I know I can back myself to get out of it. I know I'm funny enough to get out of it. I know I can, start one of my fucking stories, or, whatever it is. I know that I can get out of it. And I know that putting myself in a situation I'm not very comfortable with, I know that there's a way out. There's always a way out of anything. And I think I don't know who said it to me, but it was like pretty early on. Someone was like, no one thinks about you as much as you think about yourself. And I remember doing stand-up once, and I used to have this thing written on my hands, and I never got it as a tattoo, but I probably should have. I'll talk to you about it. But I wanted to get this tattooed on my hand, and it was just, it doesn't matter. Mm. Yeah. It doesn't matter, because I used to write that on my hand every night before I used to go on stage.
Wow.
And I used to be like, it doesn't matter. And it really doesn't. Like, you look at that every night and you go, it doesn't matter. And you go, oh, right. Mm. And it sounds like a depressing thing when you see that written on it. Doesn't matter. Nothing matters. But you're like, it actually doesn't. Like, my conversation with someone, or my, me being on stage or doing something, whether or not someone enjoyed it or not, they're probably not thinking about it by the time they're home. They're probably not, unless I've really upset someone, which I try not to do. I'm always like, well, it's fine, because I've got tomorrow, and tomorrow will be way better. It is horrible sometimes. Like, there are situations that I've certainly had where you get down for a little bit and you go, oh fuck, like I've got to deal with this, like the lawsuit, like stuff like that, where you're like, it's physically draining and I don't know exactly how I'm going to get out of it. But from a very young age, I've always loved shit things. Like I love going to a bowling alley. I think it's like the most exciting thing in the world. I love a shit movie. I love shit TV. There's nothing, if someone gives me something, I'm so excited about whatever it is. If someone orders me a drink at a bar, I'm so excited to find out what it is. I don't have a plan going into anything. So anything is a bonus. Like, you're just like, oh, I get that. That's amazing. Like, and someone like makes something and they're like, I had the other night, a friend of mine made me pasta, and it was like kind of like very al dente style. Like, the pasta was really hard and I was loving it. And they kept apologizing. I was like, someone made me dinner. It's so good. Like, it's so nice when people do things for you. And I don't know. I've just always had that kind of like, oh, it's nothing's ever too bad, or nothing's like, and I don't hang around people that bring me down, or hang around people that I had a few situations where I was hanging out with people that were like really negative and everything was an issue. And I was always finding the nice thing about it, and they were always kind of bringing me down about me trying to find the nice thing about it. And you're like, well, I just don't want to hang out with you, because that's draining.
It's amazing. Like, you do have some responsibility for the energy that you bring to a situation. Right?
Yeah.
And I can see so much why you've gotten so far through meeting people, Sam, because what a bloody gift to humanity you are. No wonder people want to hang out with you. Just a shiny beacon of positivity. You're going to come over and eat my shit pasta and tell me it's amazing.
Yeah, always.
But there's that saying that you're the sum of the 4 people you spend the most time with, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think for me personally, particularly during the like pandemic years, that became really apparent to me, because when we were sort of taken away from like the habitual things, like maybe you hang out with people just because they live close to you, or they're on your way home, or whatever, and then realizing actually I have like, this is so important. Like, this isn't just like, oh, who I do or don't go and have a drink with on a Friday night. this is impacting, like how I see the world and how much work I'm having to put in. If you're optimistic and you walk into a room and you're met with optimism, you don't have to work hard.
Yeah.
But if you're the optimistic one and you walk into 3 negative Nancys, then you're working your ass off to just bring everyone up to a neutral level.
Yeah, and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
I get surprised a lot when people say yes to doing my podcast, like people that I'm like huge fan of for like, you know, this or that. And then every time I find out that it's because, you know, someone has mentioned you should do it. Or you should, a friend of theirs, like a mutual friend or someone has gone, you should do it. And I know that when I meet them, it's going to be okay. Like I know that when I actually physically meet them, I know that, you know, I'll put as much energy and I'll be really positive. And if they don't want to be positive, then that's okay. If they don't want to meet my energy or they don't want to do that, then that's okay because that's them as a person. Like I can't change that.
Yeah.
But I do find that if people are so exhausting to be around, then you're like, I don't know how you get through life. Like, I don't know, you know, like I love coffee. Like I have like 3 coffees a day and I'm like having the best day of my life. But like, you know, today I'm like going to film something and then I'm having dinner with friends tonight. And I'm like, those 2 things are so exciting because you go, oh my God, like even coming, like, you know, I this morning I took my dog for a walk. That was exciting because I'm so excited seeing him sniff. Like he gets so excited about sniffing.
I totally relate.
Yeah. And he's been in a rescue shelter for over a year. And so taking him to the beach, taking him anywhere, he's just so excited and he can't handle it. Like it's so beautiful to see. And then you're like, I was like, I'll go for a swim and that's so nice because I zone out for an hour and that's really nice. And then you go, coming to do this podcast, that's really exciting. And then I'll go and like pick up some gear from a studio and I'll get to see someone that I haven't seen in a long time. And that'll be really nice to see him. And then I'll go and film the thing, which will be amazing because I'll get to hang out with people that I really like. And then dinner with, you know, is a relaxing thing with like, you know, a few friends that I probably see like a few times a year. And it's so exciting because it's like, so you just kind of feel like, you're kind of if you make yourself feel like you're at home all the time, then it's going back to that homesickness thing. It's like, if you make your own friends, you make your own family, you make your own, my parents are still alive, and I do get along with my parents, but it's like, you know, if you make your own family, if you make your own friendship circles, then they all feel like you're at home. They make you feel like you're at home. So then anytime you rock up, it's like a little home everywhere you go. And it's kind of a really nice thing because, you know, being in a city and being like, you know, someone who's very excited about everything all the time, it's so nice to be able to go places and drive places and you know, or, you know, get an Uber and go to and I know I'm going to have a great conversation with the Uber driver on the way there. I know that the Uber driver is going to be lovely. I know that, you know, every part of that bit is great. And if the Uber driver is not wanting to have a conversation, then I can listen to a podcast or I can, you know, I know that everything feels like a home if you make it feel like a home, but you have to kind of work hard to make everything feel like that, I think.
And make the choice to calibrate your vision for that because there's always it's like in any given moment, you can choose to see the 10 shitty things or the 10 amazing things.
Yeah.
And they are always available.
Yeah.
At any given choice, but it's like it's at some point you're just like, I'm signing up for the good stuff because it makes life rad.
Yeah,
You get to just make that choice.
Yeah. Look, I find myself sometimes getting annoyed by things where you're like, oh shit, this happened, that happened. And sometimes you go, why did they do that? Or like I told a friend something the other day and they called another person and told them and then that person and I was like, oh my God, the drama of that. And I was like, I just called my friend. I was like, what are you doing? Like that's ruined my night.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like when people like make your night a bad night, you're like, please don't do that because I told you that in confidence and I didn't want you to go and do that. And that makes you look bad, not me, because the thing I said wasn't bad. It was just, it's a thing that happened that my friend told me about. And then now it's a thing. So I'm always like very protective of my time. So I'm like, well, I want to have a good time. So when people are like, you know, annoy you like that, you're like, I'll move on real quick, but it was annoying. And I always confront people straight away because I'm like, I don't want there to be any confusion or if I meet up with them next time, it's going to be awkward. So I'm just like, I just call them straight away and I'm like, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that?
Although I will say, like that kind of shit with friends is the worst feeling.
Yeah.
but I do love some like low stakes gossip.
Yeah.
Just like I love people that
yeah.
I don't care about and have like
that's
I
great.
love. I'm like, they did what?
Yeah. I went out the other night with some influencers and that's not my crowd.
What a sentence.
Yeah. Oh my
Wow.
God. And it was weird. I only knew one of them. And the drama, I always thought people from reality shows, like the producers create the drama or something. No, these people created the drama. And it was like one person said one thing to someone, it upset them. Two people went to the bathroom and chatted more. They came back, confronted him about something. Then two more people left. And I was loving it.
Was a camera on this?
No,
This
no,
was just
no.
a night out.
It was just a night out and I wish the camera was, I left after an hour and a half.
Yeah, okay.
I was
You're
like,
just
oh, yeah, it was too much. And I was like, I'm going to go. I messaged a friend during it going, do you want to have a drink in Collingwood? And I was like, sure. So I left like St Kilda. Obviously it was in St Kilda. Yeah. And I was like, I'm out. I'm done. But it was so fascinating to watch. I was like, and these people live for the drama.
Yeah.
And I can't ever be that person.
Oh, wow. It's an interesting, because I love reality TV.
Yeah.
I love shitty TV.
Yeah.
I enjoy it so much. Drama in real life, no thank you, please.
Yeah.
Watching other people do it on the TV,
Yeah.
100%.
But only when it's low stakes. I'm like, the smaller the stakes,
Yeah, yeah.
usually
Totally.
the bigger the drama.
Yeah.
And that's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's very funny. Like I had a friend a little while ago and it was a big drama at the time because it was just so funny. It was like they brought over, I made them dinner. It was a really nice night. And then as they were leaving, they brought a nice bottle of wine and we didn't have it. And then as they were leaving, they took it and they like covered the label as they were leaving. Anyway, and I called my friend right away. And I was like, what is going on? And then I chatted about it to a few people and they thought it was the best thing in the world. So like that sort of.
That's perfect.
That's funny.
drama.
That's the
Yeah.
exact
Yeah.
level of like, no one even cares.
No one
That's
really
what makes
cares.
it good.
It's just a weird thing to do.
But it's also like, it's fine until they cover the label.
Exactly.
If they just picked up
yeah.
their wine and taken it, you would have been like, all right.
Or if they said,
Fine.
oh, I'm just going to take this.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's easy. That's an easy conversation to have. But the fact they covered it and tried to hide a bottle from it, like I know what a bottle of wine looks like. Like you're trying to cover it up.
Sunglasses.
Yeah. We've chatted about it since and it's very funny. I bring it up all the time with him now.
I love that.
Oh my goodness. That's so funny. Well, we're probably getting towards, and we're quite over it. So I think maybe as a way of kind of starting to wrap things up, Sammy, one of the things that seems to be consistent throughout the different elements of your career and your life is a kind of, well, obviously a boundless positivity, which is wonderful and wonderful to be around, but also like a sort of like a backing yourself and a courage to ask. And I think particularly for people in creative fields where there's this either true or untrue perception that industries are hard to break into and it's hard to get your start, and maybe, you haven't been doing it for 10 years so you don't have your merit badge to get in the door. What advice, or doesn't it have to be advice, or your experience of that ask, what makes for a good ask?
I don't think you should ever be afraid of asking someone because the worst they can say is no.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like that at the end of the day, if they say no, then that's fine. Like, it's I've certainly done stuff where it's like someone says no and then later they see friends doing it and then they're like, oh, can I, they come back and they go, oh, can I do it? Or can
My schedule's cleared up.
Yeah, my schedule's cleared up. All right. And I think the worst thing people can say is no, but I don't think people ask enough. And I think it's because I'm a straight white man that I'm not afraid of asking. And I think maybe it's harder, for a different person to, whoever you are, sometimes people feel really nervous about it and they worry about it and they worry about taking up someone's time or energy or whatever it is. But I don't think there's anything wrong with asking if someone will do something. And, if they say no, then that's okay. And you move on to the next person and you find someone. But I certainly found like at least creative people are usually like, if you make it easy for them, they'll do it. Like if they're not spending any money on it, if they're not going out of that, like, you know, that if they come to you, whatever, but if they're not having to put too much effort into something, they're really happy to do it because there's no harm in doing things. And I think, people get really scared about asking because it's like, oh, maybe they'll say no and then, you know, I won't ever get to do something with them again or, you know, whatever it is. But I think the only time people say no is when they're really busy.
Yeah.
And then there's another time that'll come down the line that'll be a lot easier.
It's so true, but it's one of those things that it's disproportionate, the fear to the actual potential outcomes.
Yeah,
I'm so scared of asking for X, Y, Z.
Yep.
But literally the worst thing that can happen is someone says no.
Yeah.
So why do we get so terrified?
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. I think it's just hard. Like I think people just think it's hard and then, you know, too hard to send a message or too hard to do that sort of stuff. Like, and it does seem like you build it up too much in your head and you think it's going to be this huge thing when usually things don't turn out like that. You know, it's very uncommon if something blows up and becomes this huge thing, like the dinner with the influencers. You know, like it's very rare that something will turn out bad, I think.
Yeah.
But that's because I ask everyone all the time for everything. I just find it so much easier to just go, would you like to do this? And they go, no, or they go, yes, or they'll go and ask me in 6 months. And I put it in my diary and I ask again in 6 months. Like I'm so organized that I go, okay, well, if you say no now, but ask me to contact you in 6 months, then I'll contact them again in 6 months. Like, you know, and they asked for it. So I'll be contacting them in exactly 6 months. Like I kind of feel like that's the way to do it. And you'll find people easily that will want to help and will want to do things because they're always the best people. Like, you know, my best friend, Will Anderson, he is very giving and someone that promotes people heavily, really advocates for people and all different kinds of people. And I think that's a powerful person to have out there that goes, I want to support people that want to do something. And always helps whoever it is, if he can, always helps people do things. Like I've had crowdfunding campaigns and things where you like put it out there to the world to finish something or, you know, and you always kind of feel bad asking for that kind of stuff because you're like, I'm just trying to finish a film or I'm just trying to do something. But the people that want to help are the people that want to do it, like Patreon or whatever it is, whatever you're doing, the people that want to support it are really excited about it. So you just have to kind of find those people.
On the note of asking, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just loved every second of that conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
And also to thank Jessamy for reaching out to you. Can I just say, she was so excited and sent me about 10 screenshots of your conversation. She was like, I just put on my big girl pants and I just sent Sammy a message and you got back and you were so lovely. And yeah, we've been so excited. So thank you for saying yes. And thank you, Jess, for being such an amazing partner and putting this out into the world and making this happen. Well, it's fucking awesome.
I'm so glad that I did. It's such a joy, Sam. Thanks so much for hanging out with us and expect our post-hang text.
Yeah,
shortly.
Great. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I love doing it, so thank you.
Oh, just before we go, Sammy, where can people find you?
So I do a podcast called Confessions. That is Confessions, the podcast on everything. So on all of the social media things, it's Confessions. I've tried on TikTok. Not very good at TikTok, but I've tried on TikTok. Confessions, a podcast on TikTok. Facebook. Don't know if anyone's still using Facebook to follow things, but it's on there. And and that comes out every single Sunday. And there's there's almost 300 episodes.
They're so fucking good. I was laughing out. That's so good.
Oh, thank you. And then my other podcast is a interview show that I've just started called Nature or Nurture, where I talk to fascinating people about what makes them who they are today. And so there's two different podcasts. Too many podcasts.
Well, they're both amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sam.
No, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Imposter Syndrome Club. Please follow us wherever you find your podcasts. And if you're feeling extra kind, rate and review. Or if you got any insights or value from this, share with a friend.
You can also find us on Instagram at ImposterPod or online at impostersyndromeclub.com.